When you think about a conflict as huge as the American Civil War, it can be overwhelming, right? Millions of soldiers, all these epic battles. It's a lot. But sometimes the best way to really get it is to zoom all the way in, to follow the story of just one single unit and see the war through their eyes. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to trace the path of one New York regiment from a bunch of raw recruits into some of the most hardened veterans of the war. And the best part is, we can build this story from the words of the men who were actually there, like their own historian, Reverend James R. Bowen. He wasn't just writing about battles and dates. No, he wanted to capture it all: the camp life, the crazy adventures, the human side of it. His words, well, they're going to be our guide as we head back in time. At the heart of their story, you've got this motto, Semper Paratus, a Latin phrase meaning always ready. As we're about to see, these two little words were going to be tested by unbelievable hardship, they were going to be totally redefined by experience, and in the end, they were proven right in the crucible of battle. Okay, let's dive right in. Our story kicks off in September 1862. 1,000 men from Western New York answered the call to war. And these weren't professional soldiers, not by a long shot. We're talking farmers, clerks, teachers, just regular citizens, organized into what was then known as the 130th New York Volunteer Infantry. And get this, their departure was a huge deal. I mean, this wasn't some quiet train pulling out of a station. 10,000 people, friends, family, you name it, they all gathered at Portage Bridge to see them off. Just imagine that scene. It was this incredible moment of patriotic pride, but it was also the very last moment of peace these men would know for a long, long time. So all that patriotic excitement? Yeah, that met the harsh reality of war pretty quick. The regiment was shipped off to Suffolk, Virginia. They were probably expecting these glorious battles, but what they found instead was 9 months of backbreaking labor, sickness, and tough discipline. Suffolk was going to be their school, their training ground, and their forge. And this just strips away any romance about war, doesn't it? The daily reality was grim. Hospitals were basically old barns with cornstalks for bedding. Their food was often this coarse, awful corned beef the men called salt horse. Sickness was this constant, relentless enemy. For so many of them, the first real test wasn't even facing the enemy. It was just surviving camp life. But even in all that misery, the human spirit, it finds a way. There's this great story about a witty Irish soldier named Owen Carragher. A general called him out for having a rusty gun, and Owen, without missing a beat, shot back this perfect reply. He basically said, "Sure, my rifle might be rusty, but you should see my spade. It's shiny from all the digging." It just shows you the kind of humor and resilience that kept these guys going. So after 9 long months of digging trenches and fighting off disease as infantrymen, bam, everything was about to change. An order came down from high command that would completely redefine their role in the war and give them a new name, a name that they would make legendary. And what a transformation it was. I mean, you can't get a bigger change than this. One day, they're infantry, masters of the pick and shovel. The very next, they're the First New York Dragoons, a cavalry regiment. They literally traded their shovels for sabers, their long marches for life in the saddle. A whole new chapter was beginning. And here's the wild part. They took to it with incredible speed. In August 1863, they officially joined the Cavalry Corps. By September, they're already in their first skirmishes. And by October, just 2 months later, they fight in their first major cavalry battle and win what their historian called a glorious victory. Talk about a quick study. This success, well, it got them noticed. They had proven themselves, and pretty soon they were placed under the command of one of the Union's most aggressive and effective leaders, General Philip Sheridan. As part of his famous cavalry, the Dragoons were about to be thrown into the most intense phase of the war. Under Sheridan, the pace was absolutely relentless. There was no easing into it. The Dragoons were plunged straight into the brutal, chaotic fighting of the Wilderness Campaign. Just this absolute nightmare of a battle in dense, confusing woods. It was some of the most savage combat of the entire war. And right after that, they're off on the Trevilian Raid. This was a massive, destructive ride deep into Confederate territory. They were tearing up railroads, causing chaos, and it all ended in one of the biggest all-cavalry battles of the war. And then you've got the Shenandoah Valley Campaign, and they played a huge role here. This was a series of decisive battles to wrestle control of what they called the breadbasket of the Confederacy, cutting off that vital food supply from the South. By this point, these guys are not the same men who left New York 2 years earlier. They were veterans, forged in fire. And their own historian put it perfectly. He wrote that in a dozen successful charges, the Dragoons had impetuously swept the exultant enemy like cobwebs from before them. Like cobwebs, what a powerful way to describe their confidence and their skill. So now it's the spring of 1865. The war is nearing its end, and the First New York Dragoons are a hardened elite unit. They're right at the tip of the spear, ready for that final, decisive push. And when I say the pace of that final campaign was relentless, I am not kidding. This wasn't just one battle, it was a cascade, where each victory just bled right into the next. Dinwiddie Courthouse, Five Forks, Sailor's Creek, Appomattox Station, it was just bam, 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 one after another. Their historian even wrote it was hard to tell where one battle ended and the next one began. This was the frantic, breathless end of the war. Appomattox Courthouse. Just 2 words, a simple name for a simple place that marked this monumental, world-changing event. For the men of the First New York Dragoons, these words meant the end of a 3-year odyssey of conflict and sacrifice. And then, after 3 years of constant marching, digging, and fighting, it just stopped. Silence. The war was over. And for the very first time in years, the thoughts of these soldiers so long focused on survival and the enemy right in front of them could finally turn back towards home. And their historian, Bowen, he just captures their transition back to civilian life so perfectly. They had done their part, faithfully and honorably, and with that same discipline they learned in the army, they quietly laid down their weapons and just picked up their old lives, forever changed by everything they had seen and done. Which brings us right back to where we started, to that motto. From the fevers of Suffolk to the final charge at Appomattox, they were tested in every single way you can imagine. They had to be ready for the misery of camp, for the shock of a total transformation, and for the absolute terror of battle. So the question we're left with is this. After following their entire journey, what did it truly mean for them to be semper paratus, to be always ready?